Okay, so you read the title and I know what you're thinking. This dude probably does lines of aspartame as a pre-workout or something. While it's not true, I'm hoping you'll be willing to hear me out regardless. The twists and turns that this video will take might make you forget about the fact that I've ostracized proper African American hair care standards. Probably not. Okay, so I've talked about aspartame and other non-nutritive sweeteners on this channel before, a few times actually, and even back then I was somewhat mealy-mouthed in my talks about it. I more stubbornly supported it than championed or advocated it, and with good reason. Now, I'm a personal trainer. This is not medical advice. I'm just offering my informed perspective on a somewhat complicated issue. Aspartame, stevia, and other non-nutritive sweeteners have taken on a mythical status of being the definitive death-causing agents in modern society. Telling someone to put some aspartame in their coffee is like telling that person to sunbathe in a neutron star. Telling someone to use stevia to make their oats more palatable is like telling that person to season their breakfast cereal with meth. Depending on the level of importance of the person hearing the advice, they might even consider that an assassination attempt. In this video, I'm going to focus more on aspartame because it's simply the most well-studied non-nutritive sweetener that we currently have data for, but I'm going to make the logical leap that you can just extend whatever I say here about aspartame to other non-nutritive sweeteners like sucralose, saccharin, and stevia in terms of their safety and efficacy to help me cross swords with my true concern, weight loss and/or weight management. In this video, I'm going to attempt to convince you that aspartame and/or non-nutritive sweeteners are good for you. At least that they're not bad for you and could help a lot of people with weight management issues. Okay, so now for the information dump. So obviously aspartame is an artificial sweetener. It's considered approximately 200 times more sweet than regular sugar. This is determined by scientific consumer sensory panel evaluations at universities like Ohio State. Generally speaking, when you buy aspartame off the shelf, such as Great Value aspartame at Walmart or Equal, that's only about 20 to 40 milligrams of the actual good stuff in them. There's about a gram per serving of the overall product, and the majority of the compounds that make up that gram of a product are maltodextrin and dextrose. These are added as bulk to provide volume to the product and make things more quantifiable. Maltodextrin and dextrose are both carbohydrates that can generally be found to naturally occur in whole foods, in starches, potatoes, grains, and certain fruits and vegetables. It's because of these substances why calling aspartame a non-nutritive sweetener isn't completely true. Aspartame itself will break down into phenylalanine and aspartic acid, an essential and non-essential amino acid. And last time I checked, both those things are fairly useful. And also methanol, which can be found in fruits and vegetables. And also gasoline. Now, if that last part concerns you, you should probably take a little bit of time to study some basic chemistry. These are all metabolites that are absorbed and used by the human body in normal metabolic pathways. Their caloric content is so small that the FDA labeling guideline regulations, as long as we still have an FDA, allows companies to round these product servings down to zero if the substances amount to less than 5 calories per serving. Aspartame does not cause cancer, and saying it more and thinking it louder does not change that. Scientific evidence does. Aspartame being a cancer-causing agent is not supported by any scientific research that we currently have. My possibly naive hope in humanity is that most people, including you, fearless listener, value scientific consensus to at least some degree, at least if you're watching this channel. Now, there may be some legitimate health concerns regarding aspartame if you suffer from a rare inherited disease called phenylketonuria.
Phenylketonuria.
Have you ever heard anyone say nailed it when they finish something? What does that mean? Hi, I'm Chris from Kaplan International English. Nailed it means you got it exactly right. You did exactly what you wanted to do. Although you might also see it used sarcastically on the internet to mean the opposite of that. You did a really bad job. What other phrases should we explain? Let us know in the comments.
This is a problem because when aspartame is metabolized in the body, it's broken down into 3 primary molecules, the aforementioned methanol, aspartic acid, and phenylalanine, that last one being the main issue, with phenylalanine being an essential amino acid that can't be broken down in people suffering from the aforementioned disease. As a result, this can cause a buildup of the amino acid in the body that can lead to serious health complications. Other than that, there are studies suggesting that there may be a cause for concern if you have unhealthy liver or unhealthy kidneys, but All the conclusions from human observations and clinical trials that I've been able to find have been inconclusive at best. It generally looks like we need more long-term data and randomized control trials to say anything definitive. Outside of those potential concerns, aspartame is one of the most studied consumable products on the planet. The first studies dropped shortly after its accidental discovery by scientist James Slatter in the 1960s, started gaining regulatory scrutiny in the 70s and 80s from the FDA, with the FDA removing all restrictions on the substance in the 1990s. In 2023, the IARC, International Agency for Research on Cancer, labeled aspartame as possibly carcinogenic to humans, giving it a Group 2B classification, which basically means the same thing. While some studies such as the Ramazzini studies from the 2000s and the Harvard Nurses study from 2012 suggested that there could be a link, the studies were later dismissed as problematic in terms of execution, and the IARC essentially uses these studies to apply its very weak label linking the substance to cancer. In those studies, lab rats were given aspartame and ppm as high as 5,000 milligrams per day from birth. So, numerophobes out there, trigger warning, incoming mathematics, but before we get to the math, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly where the fear of aspartame originated, but as a basis for speculation, several key events played a role in its spread and persistence. Controversy surrounding aspartame dates back to the 1960s to 1980s, when aspartame safety was hotly debated among scientists in the FDA. One major point of contention involved J.D. Searle, the company that developed aspartame. Investigations revealed issues with Searle's early animal studies, with accusations of sloppy methodology and even data falsification. This led to distrust, especially since Searle had industry ties that some saw as a conflict of interest. However, subsequent independent studies supported aspartame safety, and the FDA ultimately approved it. Despite this, skepticism persisted. In 1996, a widely viewed 60 Minutes report criticized the FDA's handling of aspartame's approval, reigniting public concerns. Then in 1999, the Nancy Markle email hoax spread across Usenet, an early internet forum, falsely linking aspartame to multiple sclerosis, lupus, and a host of other health conditions. This was essentially fake news before the term even existed, yet it gained traction among health-conscious and conspiracy-prone advocates. From there, the fear of aspartame became kind of this mimetic virus spreading throughout the growing internet and the rise of the information age. Despite decades of research confirming its safety at that point, public suspicion lingers, largely due to the emotional power of early controversies and the internet's ability to amplify outdated or misleading claims. Okay, with that all out of the way, it's math time. It's math time for YouTube. Pretend like there's a chalkboard here or a whiteboard here that I'm going to scribble on or something. All right. So ppm refers to parts per million. This is a unit of measurement in the hard sciences that refers to the amount of a particular substance in a mixture. Right now, we're concerned with aspartame. So, if we have a lab rat being fed 5,000 parts per million of aspartame per day since birth, that means they've been consuming 5,000 kilograms of aspartame for every kilogram of food that they consume since birth. So, let's say the average lab rat is about 0.25 kilograms and eats about 5% of their body weight in food every day. That rat's daily food intake would look something like this. That rat is eating approximately 0.0125 kilograms or 12.5 grams of food every day. So the daily aspartame intake for this lab rat would look something like this. Now, relating their aspartame consumption to the amount of body weight would look something like this. So this lab rat is consuming approximately 250 milligrams per kilogram of their body weight. In toxicology, HED stands for human equivalent dose. For a succinct definition from Oxford Reference, a dose which, when given to humans, produces an effect equal to which is produced by a dose in animals. There's a standard formula in toxicology for interspecies scaling that's based on the metabolic rates between species that looks something like this in its general form. The Km factor accounts for differences in metabolic rates between species, which is why we use it to convert animal doses to human doses. You can find more information on all of this in the description. For a lab rat, the formula looks more like this. Our previously calculated conversion factor for rats to humans is 0.16. So if we took an 84 kilogram human male, which is approximately 185 pounds, about what I currently weigh, and we multiply 40 milligrams per kilogram by that, it would look something like this. So for a person that weighs approximately 185 pounds, an equivalent dose of aspartame would be almost 3,400 milligrams of aspartame per day. Now, I just want to put that number into context, so let's just do a tiny bit more math. Okay, so this part is a fair bit easier. Let's look at Diet Coke for an example. Cans are essentially processed and preserved in a 12 by 5 centimeter can. There's approximately 180 milligrams of aspartame in a can of Diet Coke. Let's just round that number to 200. 3,360 divided by 200 gives us 16.8. That means you would have to drink almost 17 cans of Diet Coke per day for life to get a dose equivalent to what those rats got in the Ramazzini studies. A doses that didn't even prove to the scientific community to be a causative agent for cancer relative to the controls in their experiments. Remember our human equivalent dose from earlier, 40 milligrams per kilogram? Guess what? That also functions as the acceptable daily intake for aspartame, 40 milligrams per kilogram per day by the American Cancer Society, the FDA, Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives, and other organizations. So if you're worried about exceeding the ADI, acceptable daily intake, of aspartame, and again, there's nothing suggesting that if you exceeded this very high threshold, you'd have much to worry about, at least in terms of cancers, I think you have a small degree of wiggle room. When it comes to weight management, maybe for some, because the thing is, if it demonstrably is not killing you through any plausible mechanisms, then it can only help considering what it substitutes for. Now, it's hard to get a consistent number on this, but estimates of the average daily caloric intake of the standard American diet, SAD as it's been happily christened, go as high as 3,600 calories. That's higher than a lot of bodybuilders and professional athletes, certainly much higher than anything I consume in any one particular day. This would not be so bad if the average American were using that excess energy to pursue physical feats other than expanding the collective circumference of those also odious love handles. About 50% of those calories are from carbohydrates, which again isn't much of a problem in the abstract, as this is within the acceptable macronutrient distribution range for the average person. If it weren't for the fact that the majority of those carbohydrates are processed simple sugars, glucose. About 35% of those calories come from fat, and only about 15% of those calories come from protein sources. Ultra-processed foods are killing our population, but it's not the idea of processing itself that's doing the damage. People have this overmastering inclination to think that any degree of processing regarding their food is bad, when that is simply not the case. They succumb to what is known as the naturalistic fallacy. The idea that anything found within some tight proximity to its original state found in undisturbed nature is somehow good for you. The further removed the thing is from its undisturbed state found in nature is bad for you. This is like walking through a dense unknown forest, seeing almonds growing on an almond tree and thinking to yourself, great, almonds, my favorite fitness influencer on Instagram pretends to eat these by the handfuls every day. And here they are in their wholesome, natural, undisturbed habitat. What serendipity? Little did you know that bitter almonds often found in the wild, as opposed to sweet almonds that are typically found in the grocery store, contain high amounts of cyanide, a compound liable to produce a severe case of death. When bitter almonds are used as food products, they go through processing in large part to remove any potential death-causing compounds like cyanide. Likewise, if I pick some broccoli from your backyard and decide to deep fry it, that is not only processing its energy and nutritional content beyond any recognition, but it increases the chance of acrylamide formation through the Maillard reaction. Acrylamide is a substance with a far stronger link to cancer than aspartame. Note that I said there's a stronger link. That does not mean acrylamide consumption will give you cancer or causes cancer. You are being exposed to an epidemiological risk. When being scientifically rational, nuance is key. Acrylamide is generally formed when high carbohydrate foods are fried or baked at higher temperatures. While it's classified as a probable carcinogen, a Group 2A classification by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, studies have not found a strong link between dietary acrylamide intake and actual cancer risk in humans as far as I know, but I digress. Most whole foods you consume have to go through some degree of processing before it is put onto a market and sold to you. The processing of foods in and of itself is generally harmless. What matters is what the processing is doing to the food you are consuming. And the processing of the foods relevant to the SAD diet is that it is increasing the energy density, calories per kilogram, of the products astronomically on average. These kinds of foods are provided the distinction of being called ultra-processed foods for a reason, and they make up a disproportionate total of the modern standard American diet. People generally have a fear of chemicals that goes beyond rational, particularly when the chemical is unknown, which quite frankly is going to be most of them, even if you have a very extensive education on the subject. What's known as a chemical space, the theoretical space of all possible molecules, is said to be between 10 to the 18 and 10 to the 100. That latter number is what is called a googol and exceeds the number of atoms in the observable universe. So that's where that comes from. The irony here is that everything is a chemical. People hear weird sounding scientific names with Latin and Greek origins, and this immediately raises their hackles. Oftentimes, however, the fear is misplaced. The dose makes the poison, and the importance of context is exceedingly high. If I say hydrogen oxide is in your drink, the average person might recoil in fear. If I use the colloquial term water or even H2O, the average person thinks nothing of it. Even after explaining that to a person and telling them that there's hydrogen oxide in their cup of methylxanthine, they might recoil in horror again. To reiterate, the dose makes the poison. Did you know that there's a trace amount of uranium in everyday food products that you eat? Did you know that you're being exposed to gamma radiation every time you step outside the house, even at night? Cyanide can be found in trace amounts of every almond you eat bought from the store. It can also come in higher doses in capsule form, useful for extraordinary circumstances, such as when one of your friends threatens to sit you down and force you to listen to a new Kanye album. Now, we know the effects of excess simple sugars and saturated fats typically found in ultra-processed foods on the health of the modern population. The contents of ultra-processed foods is considered one of the largest contributors to the obesity pandemic. High exposure being associated with diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart diseases, various cancers, and metabolic lesions. We have randomized controlled trials, cohorts, and systematic meta-analyses spanning decades, basically spelling out that excess calories from these foods are problematic for modern health outcomes for myriad easily perceptible reasons. But if you're someone consistently consuming prepackaged, convenient, energy-dense foods and you're foregoing using aspartame because you think it might arouse even an apparition of cancer in your hospitable system, ignoratio elenchi. You are literally missing the point. You are erecting a false binary where you think avoiding aspartame might be the healthy choice because non-nutritive sweeteners might cause cancer, when suffering from obesity due to a skewed energy balance will much more likely direct you towards the event you are actively trying to avoid with that uninformed decision. Not to mention the myriad other negative health consequences associated with obesity. And this is made worse by the fact that it's a substance that, to the contrary, can actually help in these regards. The number one tactic subsumed within a larger overall strategy of more suitable energy balance manipulation is do not drink your calories. Many people willing to simply make the switch to diet soda alone could potentially shave hundreds or even thousands of calories off of their daily, weekly, monthly energy intake, resulting in potentially tens of pounds of weight loss. Now I hear the clickety-clack of some of your keyboards out there already. I'd rather just drink water. You're full of it. Because if that were the case, you'd be drinking water already. If you're one of those people primed to enjoy sweet beverages, especially with their food, especially when you're dieting, and already feeling somewhat deprived of foods you typically enjoy, having the taste of a sweet beverage goes a long way in helping curb cravings, not just for beverages with real sugar, but can potentially help with cravings for other junk foods as well. Take it from a former 300 pounds type 2 diabetic that used to consume north of 2 to 3 2-liter bottles of Mountain Dew every day at one point. I want to make it abundantly clear, I am not suggesting that aspartame is some kind of panacea for weight loss and or weight maintenance. I am not suggesting that everyone should be using aspartame and or non-nutritive sweeteners. I am not suggesting that the idea that aspartame causes cancer will never bear fruit in the future. But I'm also not saying that you won't suffer a goofy death 5 minutes after watching this video by slipping on a puddle in your kitchen and hitting your head on a towel like the movie Final Destination. I'm just a personal trainer. I'm not a doctor. I am not an epidemiologist, biochemist, physician, or scientific professional in any of the associated scientific fields relevant to this video. I'm just a nerd with a very high degree of passion for helping people with their health and fitness journeys. My overall point being that by all accounts relevant to a rational or even reasonable mind, aspartame and or non-nutritive sweeteners are considered safe for the average person in the recommended daily amounts, which can be qualified as exceedingly high, as I previously demonstrated, giving people tons of wiggle room in regards to their everyday use. If you are someone doing a cost-benefit or even risk versus reward analysis between the risks associated with overconsumption of ultra-processed foods with a high degree of refined carbohydrates on one side, and the risks associated with consuming non-nutritive sweeteners like aspartame on the other side, and the former is somehow tipping the scale, you may have slipped and hit your head on the kitchen tile already. All jokes aside, when put into this context, these substances can be considered good for you in comparison to alternatives in regards to the average person dealing with weight management issues. Now, let me be clear here as well. You can absolutely have a healthy relationship with simple sugars and ultra-processed foods. At the end of the day, it's overall energy balance that most tightly regulates these health outcomes. If you're a teenager training like an athlete every day, you can probably get away with eating at McDonald's every day, chasing that with a bag of Doritos and a supersized Coke, Zion Williamson notwithstanding. But if you're the average person trying to manage their weight and doesn't like the taste of black coffee, doesn't like the taste of plain oatmeal or shredded wheat, plain Greek yogurt is just too bland without the sugary processed fruits added, an otherwise wholesome dinner without a sweet tasting beverage like soda is impossible for you to enjoy, you want to make things like ice cream or milkshakes a more consistent option in your dietary habits. You can't eat salads without the salad dressing turning them into a calorie bomb. You can't eat barbecue flavored proteins without the barbecue sauce turning those into calorie bombs, etc., etc. You are hampering your capacity to fight a battle where the odds of your success, on average, are already vastly stacked against you. You're essentially bringing a plastic fork to a gunfight. The average person simply finds it hard to exist in the current food environment without succumbing to certain temptations, and I think a lot of health professionals, unless they know something not presented here that I don't, are doing a disservice to clients by not being more vocal about the strength of these substances for a lot of people. Suggestions often come heavily caveated, and those caveats stick into the minds of people and keep persisting in this myth that aspartame causes cancers and other various health maladies. So what are your thoughts? Am I overstepping my boundaries? Am I drawing any incorrect conclusions from these citations or data? Am I interpreting anything incorrectly? Am I just an idiot and just plain wrong? My hope with a video like this is just to start a dialogue about something that I've been considering and researching for some years. Non-nutritive sweeteners like aspartame help me a substantial deal in losing and managing my weight, so of course my bias is going to be strong. I was addicted to soda at one point, and I'm not sure I would have ever kickstarted my health journey without products like Diet Soda and Crystal Light being on the market, and they were valuable tools for me. And I think there are a lot of others that are out there that might be similar, but they're scared to utilize those tools because of myths that persist about them. The ideal for me is that if I'm more right than wrong about this, that people with better qualifications than myself start recommending non-nutritive sweeteners more strongly than they currently do, free of the many caveats, qualifications, and hemming and hawing that are often associated with these substances, because I just don't think they justify it. But of course, for the final time, I'm just a bungling, Butterfingers having, but bubbly personal trainer. Please consult your healthcare practitioner for the most actionable advice relevant to you first and foremost, before listening to some nappy-headed, self-nominated, self-narrated nerd that just likes to stir the pot. Sucks to be you. Hey, I hope you found the video at the very least informative and worth your time. This video took much more time and effort to put together than I originally anticipated with the research and editing that went into it, and it's easily my largest project on here. I initially thought it would come together in a week and a half at most, and this ended up taking almost a month to put together, so I hope you found something to appreciate about it. That said, this is something I'd like to do more with better quality, not only in terms of the information presented, but how the information is presented. But that does require time and funds that I don't currently have, which is why I'm going to try starting a Patreon. This is a very competitive space here on YouTube, but if you believe in your boy and have any appreciation for what was done here, please consider joining. Any and all support would be much appreciated. That link will be in the description. I'm out. Laters.